Some of the hardest conversations that we have are not with people who have a career that's in trouble or that are struggling at work. Maybe not, they're not fired. Matter of fact, for most of them, everything is going really, really well. They have a great job, have a great title. They're respected at work, and yet something just feels off. It's not that anything is broken. Again, because everything seems to be good. They're not even burned out. They're not desperate. They're not any of these things that we typically think about and we talk about and we put under the category of burned out, but they feel like they're just kind of sitting in this quiet space unnoticed. What they're doing, where the old path, the things that they were doing, just doesn't work anymore for them. I mean, the work is working, but it is for them. And oftentimes the hardest part is knowing they need to make a decision, because there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong, and they feel out of thing. So here's one of the things that I have noticed after working with people for years and years doing this is the longer you wait to make a move, when you start feeling these are red flags I'm talking about. And there's all kinds of red flags to burnout, but this is something else. This is the idling in place. The longer you wait, the easier it is to confuse patience with wisdom, because you feel like you're doing the right thing, right? And that's what we want to talk about today, is this issue of feeling uncomfortable and where you have grown to. And let's face it, most of us have grown to this. So this episode is not for professionals that are in crisis. It is for those who cannot really figure out the next step, but they know there's something that needs to happen. If that's you, that's who this is for. So this is the Company of One podcast. I am Dale Callahan. I work with professionals who have options. They all have options, right? But they don't want to default into the wrong next step. If that's you, this episode is going to feel very, very familiar to you. So let's jump in here. Let's kind of describe this feeling, and I'm seeing this more and more. I don't think it's a culture thing. Or a time thing, what's going on in culture. I think it's just this feeling that people get that are usually in somewhat of a senior position or been in a position so long. So let's kind of describe it a little bit more. They're functioning. They're showing up to work. They're productive. People trust them. There's no trouble. As a matter of fact, they're usually very well respected. When someone asks what's next for you, though, which is a common question, right? What's next? Even at the executive ranks, and if you've moved up quite a bit on teams or inside of a company and you are now at executive rank, what's next? It's kind of a common thing, right? That's what we think of, because you are a mover, right? You've demonstrated that you've been a mover on teams, in companies, whatever. So as a mover, they look at you and say, what's next? And you oftentimes feel like, I don't know. There is no next. And there's really nothing that you look out that excites you. There's nothing out there for you. It's not because you don't have any answers, but because none of them really feel quite right. When you're looking at options, nothing. You're like, that looks good over there. No, that's not a fit. That one looks good. No, that's not a fit. And you just feel like, well, there's really no options. And you start to think, is it me? Am I just incapable? Is it, should I just be content? Have I got the best I can get? It's not that you feel stuck. You just feel suspended, right? Just like sitting there floating. And you're hovering between paths, waiting for one of them to become obvious. And it may be two, it may be three, it may be four, it may be that. The weird part is this can feel harder in this suspension than it is being miserable. Because when things are bad, movement feels justified. When things are really bad, I can quit my job. When my boss is a jerk, I can justify taking some aggressive action to get out of it. When I get fired, that's bad. I take some action. But now I can't justify doing anything because everything looks really, really good. And also now movement feels risky. So this is kind of the feelings that I've heard from a lot of people, using some of their own words as I'm reading directly. So let's kind of tell the story a little bit. Let's think about what this looks like. Here's the pattern I see over and over. Someone, they'll sit across from me, just like right now, and say, I don't hate my job. I'm well paid. I'm well respected. I just don't know if I want to still be doing this 5 years from now. So I'm giving you an exact quote. And I hear that more often than you would think. And it used to be, when I say professionals now, I used to be talking about senior executive types, but it's hitting us a little bit younger now. It's hitting us at different stages now. And again, I don't know if that's culture, and I'm not going to try to guess. I just know that's what's going on. And oftentimes people they'll lower their voice a bit, and they're like, I just don't want to mess this up. I just don't want to mess it up. They know they've got it good. They've got a good salary. They got a lot of different things. And if they take the wrong move, they just feel like, well, they've blown it all. Because they do have options and they have some interesting paths to go down. But some of the doors, they are open, could open. But every option is a opportunity cost that feels like they're giving something up. Right? If I do this, I lose that. And the things that we are usually giving up, here's the ones that get listed to me most often. Status. I have a certain status. I have a certain identity that at my company. Job title, salary, even in family. I was watching somebody the other day that was retiring from the military, that was at the Pentagon, and was talking about the day before. He had a reserved parking place, and he was respected, listened to, whether he was acknowledging whether that meant anything or not. He didn't know, but when he spoke, people listened. And he says, and now the next day, my parking place is not there when he had to go back to do things, and people, it's just different. Your status is gone. You're a retired military officer. You still have status, but it's not the same status. But a lot of times what I'm hearing is the story they've been telling themselves and other people for a long time. This is who I have identified myself as. And I would say men struggle with this more than women. That probably is, obviously. But just let this sit for a minute and think about it. The story I've been telling myself and other people for a long time. I'm having to deal with my own story. So they wait. They're not lazy. As a matter of fact, they feel like they're being thoughtful, responsible. And they go and they gather more information, and they keep performing at the level and even above the level. And they tell themselves they're being patient and responsible. And maybe they are. Probably not. There is a point, and I don't know where that point is, that you've moved from being patient and being responsible to avoidance. And many of us, and I'd say many in the culture, because we know in our culture that the disconnect on the workforce. And many in our culture have disconnected at a later. They were top performers, and now they're disconnected. It's not like the workforce that's just totally disconnected all the time. It's they've grown into, I just can't care anymore. It's not that they don't care. It's that they just don't see the point of it anymore. And it's a dangerous place to be. So let's kind of now. So that's the story. That's kind of what's going on. Let's kind of put a name to this problem. What really is, because this is the part most people misread. And I just really want you to. I'm not going to sit here and offer a whole bunch of solutions, but I think one of we all have this solution in us, and sometimes we have to talk it through and get some advisors. But I think the first thing is to recognize that there's what the problem is. And that's what I'm really trying to highlight here is recognize there is this problem. And it's not just you. That's the other thing is we usually think it's just me. This is the part we often misread, though. They assume that the problem is fear. The other is burnout. The other is I've lost my confidence. And it's not usually any of those things. Usually it actually turns up, it's something as we hear about quiet, it's quieter. It's a decision stall, if you will. The decision stall doesn't come from weakness, and it doesn't. Actually, decision stalls come from competence. You know how to do your job. You have ability. You're respected. You know what you're doing. So whether you're a senior person that's doing that, or maybe you're a junior person, but we get into this position. I know where I am now, but I don't know where to go next. And sometimes having too many acceptable paths gets you there. But usually it's that there's no, from an engineering perspective, what we would call a forcing function. Being retired, being fired. A forcing function, something that forces you to take action. I get fired, I get demoted, I'm having to move into another city. Something that forces me to take action. When we're at this point here, we are finding, without the forcing function, we are kind of in this problem set mode. So, and I said to you, one of the things I'm trying to do here is not to tell you what to do, because I don't think it is. We're in the internet age, we're social media. There's all these people telling you, okay, here, if you got problem A, do X, Y, and Z. I don't think that works. It probably doesn't work half the time anyway, because we're humans, we have experiences, we have different families, we have different things, so it's just not that clear cut. And advice sometimes makes it worse. And let me tell you why. Advice generally comes from the fact that you're trying to escape pain. As a matter of fact, from a marketing perspective, what you see a lot of executive coaches and people out there that do is they're trying to highlight pain, and they think you're trying to escape that pain, right? If I'm a fitness coach or a fitness person, I think you're trying to escape the pain of my health crisis, or I don't like the way I look or feel or have energy, whatever. There's real pain. But that for the person I'm talking to, that's not really what's going on. They're not really trying to escape their pain. At least not in the traditional sense. They're trying to avoid regret. Oftentimes the advice is, and things I used to say to people, right, is especially when I was busy helping people start a lot of companies, I would say take the leap. Now, I was never quit your day job and go do it. But take the leap, get busy, go after your side thing. And when they hear take a leap or follow your passion, or any of these kind of things, it feels disconnected. It feels because we're not sitting here saying we need to get out of this, right? So I met with a client a couple of days ago. Great job, great respect, very respected. His job will probably never go away. I mean, he can work there as long as he wants. He's being paid well, and that's normal. That what I just described to you is fairly normal. He's an executive, but he doesn't really feel like he's doing anything. He doesn't feel like he's contributing anything. He feels like he can do his job behind his back. He doesn't see that there's any place to grow, and he likes the people, respects the people, is respected. But he's like, I'm not trying to escape. I'm not trying to get out of this. I don't know what I'm trying to do, but I just feel something's off. I just feel it's off. And I've been here for a while. So what we're trying to do in his case, and in most of our cases, how do we choose something? How do I take my next step without blowing things up? Now, it could be financially, it could be with my family, it could be my income, it could be my respect. Am I going to go from this thing? And I see this so often with people, coming out of the military is one great example. Leaving large companies where you have this title, whatever it is, because if you have a big giant company name with a title, there's an incredible amount of clout. The title doesn't have to be that big, but there's an incredible amount of clout that goes with a big company. The bigger the title, the bigger the clout. And sometimes even with a medium-sized company, if you have a big title, senior vice president, president, owner, whatever it is, there's a lot of clout. And if you step away and say, I'm going to go start my own thing, or I'm going to go do this other job, or you've walked away from all that clout, like our military friend I just described. Yeah. So it slowly shifts you away from choosing to reacting. Opportunities narrow. They kind of narrow quietly, right? They go away over time. You don't really see them dying, but they are. Confidence starts to erode, and it becomes subtle, and it's natural because you're not as passionate, don't care about your work as more. It doesn't mean you don't care, but you're just not gung-ho anymore, and you become the person that's no longer the go-to person. You stop feeling like you're the author of your next chapter, and you start feeling like you're a character in somebody else's chapter. And this isn't because you failed and it's or because you never chose. That's the real cost, because you never chose. It's not about money, it's not about titles, it's about agency. It's about your ability to take control. So let's reframe this. I mean, so I'm not going to try to solve this for you. I'm not going to give you the 3 steps you need to do, but I want to bring to awareness this issue, because I'm hearing it so often that, and I hear so often people will say it's just me. So let me reframe this and tell you, just take a little pressure off of you. Your next step doesn't have to be permanent. Let me just take the pressure off of you the first time. It's not about you. It's not about your age. Many people will do this, and especially in senior levels, they're closer to retirement, and they'll think that, well, I've just aged out. But yet I see it in younger people. It's not about competent. It's not about the movement of technology and you not keeping up. All these things that we might justify in our mind. But I have noticed some kids coming out of, let's say, high school or college. It doesn't really matter. They're beginning. They have this fear that if they choose something, they're going to be stuck there. I remember hearing that for the first time years ago and thinking that's just really silly way of thinking. You just don't understand. But it's not a silly way of thinking. That's how they think. That's how we think. But they feel like if I choose this career path or I go take this job, I'm going to be stuck there. And they justify that thinking, I think, because a lot of times they're looking around at their parents and their family members who many times hate their job, but they've been doing it for 30 years. So the same thing happens later, right? We're thinking if we jump and take a leap, like I've had lots of people take a leap into other companies. They take a leap into other industries, and then they come back in a year and say, that was cool, it was great, but it wasn't for me. They may have started their own company, and it just wasn't for me. And that's the thing, is you need to understand, and this is not permanent. There is no. Your next step doesn't have to be permanent. You don't have to go into it as if it is permanent. It doesn't have to define the rest of your career. It doesn't redefine what you've already done. It doesn't. And you know what? It doesn't even have to be obvious before you move. You don't have to have a clear set of paths. And this I say, to people who are younger. They think, well, I've got to have my career all thought through. I've got to have all the steps thought through. And usually, even when we do that, we're wrong, right? So a lot of times when we're at this higher level, that's what we think. We got to have all the steps thought through, and they'll be wrong. But you don't. So we're not treating our next step here like a verdict. It's really just an experiment. So if you reframe in that way, then that this is an experiment, then it helps take some pressure off. So, all right, so we're not going to go into any detail about how to do that because that's very different from probably all of us. But if you're in this space, though, you probably are feeling like there's something broken, there's something that needs adjustment, right? It doesn't really mean anything has to change. As a matter of fact, that is one option is that we can accept is nothing has to change. That's always the option on the table when people come to me. I'm trying to decide between job A or job B or starting a company or doing this. The third option is to do nothing. Just keep doing what you're doing. Or the fourth option, keep doing what you're doing. That's fine. And you may decide that is the best option. This is just your brain at work. Thinking, I feel something. I feel unsettled. Not necessarily burned out, not necessarily bored, just unsettled. But I will leave you with a question, though. Or a couple of questions, I guess. What are you waiting to feel before you move? When I say move, I don't mean change jobs, careers, anything like that. But what are you waiting to feel? And if waiting is a decision, which it is, what decision are you making by waiting? Because rarely for me, and I think rarely for most of us, but rarely does clarity show up first. Clarity tends to show up in motion. Now, it doesn't mean drastic motion, but clarity usually shows up when you are in motion. It's like getting the ship into the water and starting out on your voyage, and we can start to steer at that point, and we can start to navigate. But you first got to get the ship into the water, right? So what I want to talk about next time. So this time again, I want to just leave you thinking. I want you to process this. I want you to get your head around that this is not abnormal. That it's not just you. That a lot of these things are decisions that you're making. One of the big decisions you're making is the failure to make a decision and just kind of waiting things out. But next time, we're going to talk more about how to move without blowing things up. How to make some moves without blowing things up. I spend a lot of time there with me and others, people that I work with. But for now, I just really want you to notice where you are.